we'll do the blessings. Feel free to unmute and do them with us.
Baruch et Adonai Hamvorach, Baruch Adonai Hamvorach le'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu im kol ha'amim, ve'natan lanu et Torato, Baruch ya Shekhinah notenet haTorah.
See a few words before we jump into the reading. So we've been on this theme of Exodus and liberation since the beginning of the book of Exodus. And last week we weren't together, but we read Parshat Mishpatim. And if you received my email, you would have heard my words or read my words about that Parsha. But briefly, in that Parsha, the people were given both concrete laws and rules for how to create a just society, as well as broad moral principles and values, including the one that's repeated the most in the Torah, loving the stranger and caring for the needy. And liberation requires not, and a few weeks ago we went through steps. We had a whole Torah study. We went through steps of different steps on our liberation journey. And so I'm saying we're still on it, right? So we haven't reached liberation. We're still wandering in the desert and doing all sorts of crazy things. And liberation requires not only that we leave behind the oppression, but true liberation requires that we don't repeat that oppression in building a new society, but rather that we build a very different world. One that has concrete laws and also moral principles, and one that's grounded in values of love and care and kindness and generosity, not just for those who we love, not just for those who look like us and think like us, but for those that we deem as other, for those that we might even put into the category of it at times. And that's really the movement, right? From oppression to liberation. We are not there in the Torah, and we are not there in our world today, none of us. And in this week's Parsha, Terumah, which means like an offering or a contribution or a gift, the people are given guidelines or instructions for building a dwelling place for the divine, a mishkan, which is a movable sanctuary that they are to carry throughout their wilderness journey in which the divine dwells. And so one of the things that this made me think about is that part of what we're learning here is that liberation also requires, both in our mind and our body, in our spirits and our souls, that we build a sacred place for divine presence. And that place be both internally within ourselves, but also in the world. And so we're going to start reading the Parsha. I will interrupt in a few places, and then we will have some questions for breakout room, and then we'll come back. So we're going to start with the Parsha, and Shabbat Shalom to those of you who have just joined us. Thanks for being here. It's lovely to have you. And would somebody be willing to unmute and just start reading in English? Thank you. It's English. Don't be shy. I'd love to hear a different voice than mine. Would somebody please unmute? Thank
I'll
you.
do it.
Thanks, Nikki.
Tell the Israelite people to bring me gifts. You shall accept gifts from me from every person whose heart is so moved.
Hold on, I'm interrupting.
Okay.
So here's a really interesting, this just seems so like we could just say it in passing. Tell them to bring me gifts. But read the second part of that, Nikki. You shall.
And these are the gifts?
No, you shall accept of line 2, sorry.
You have to bring it back.
You shall accept.
Oh, and these are the gifts that you shall accept from them. Gold.
No, sorry. And it says, tell the Israel people to bring me gifts. And then it says, you shall accept gifts for me from every person whose heart is so moved.
Oh, I see.
This isn't, you have to bring the gift, right? The divine only wants gifts from people whose heart is so moved. Imagine for a moment this kind of giving. One that is truly from the heart rather than that which is demanded or required or given out of guilt. The divine is saying, only bring me gifts from people whose heart is so moved. And so this for me, when I think about this, is what what is truly liberating, or what does this say about liberation? To me, is that one of the things that we can learn, and I welcome you to share, is that we're truly liberating when we can give from a place of choice and not from coercion. And what needs to heal within us so that we can embody this form of presence and giving. And if anybody wants to share any thoughts about that before we continue reading, please, Nikki or anyone else, please share. Neil, yeah.
Many years ago, Noam Chomsky did a critique of the Great Depression, and he said when everybody was in such economic limitations, there was a sense of identification with others and sharing what you had. It wasn't just the material thing of sharing, it was the sense of feeling a sense of connectivity. And he wouldn't have said it this way, but the stimulating of the mirror neurons in the body that create a sense of connection as opposed to scarcity causing a sense of separateness and deprivation. So it's that sense of giving connected with values that is incredibly transformative.
I would add to what Neil said, in the classroom where I spend a lot of my time, I'm a teacher, that's what I try to generate, even in contexts where students are required to take a class. So assignments are more project-based, they're more interrelated one with the other, and they have to have value and merit. And we talk about those things related to diversity, even though it's outlawed in Texas. Yeah. So it is what it is. Yeah. From one borderland to the next, right, Kat? That's where I live.
Right.
Right.
Mm.
Andre, thank you.
Just a throwaway line. When I was going through doctoral ceremonies, one of the guest speakers, just as a throwaway line, said, you know, teaching is the most generous profession. Of all the professions, teaching is the most generous. And I've never forgotten that.
Beautiful. Yeah. Anyone else? Jacqueline.
I'm wondering about the translation of gifts, because something tells me it's not gifts, it's actually offerings.
Terumah can be translated as offerings or contributions or gifts. Yeah. So you could say, "You shall accept offerings from me," which would more align with the rest of the sentence. Yeah. Anyone else? Nikki.
Well, I'm thinking of the obligation to do teshuvah, that teshuvah is not a donation, but it's an obligation. And so I'm just wondering how that fits with coming from your heart. If we're meant to, as a spiritual practice, do teshuvah, does that always mean that your heart is in it when you do that?
It's a great question, right? So what is, I think we could assess or explore that in the following way, which is that if we're not doing teshuvah from an open heart, is it even really teshuvah? So, that's when you force an apology, is it really an apology, or is it a coerced statement that's not really deeply felt and deeply given? And then if it's not deeply felt and deeply given, is it really an apology? So
Okay, but I always took that proclamation, I guess, to do teshuvah as part of a spiritual practice. And sometimes a spiritual practice is not necessarily something that I might want or not want to do. As a practice, it's a practice, and it's like, "Oh, I don't feel like meditating today, but that's my practice." I mean,
so then I think you're dealing with the distinction between, like, in the moment, I don't want to do this, resistance, so your heart in that moment isn't open to a broader perspective of, but as a person, in my spiritual self, I actually do want to do that. And so we stretch ourselves in the moment, like, oh, I don't want to do that, because as a higher value or as a higher living in higher integrity or in a higher spiritual consciousness, we do want to do that. So that's how I would hold that tension.
Okay, fair enough. Good reframe.
Okay, anyone else, or we'll continue in the reading, and I'm going to jump in again in a few lines, and then I won't jump in again until we're done, I think. Anyone else? Great, thank you. Nikki, please.
And these are the gifts that you shall accept from them: gold, silver, and copper, blue, purple, and crimson yards, fine linen, goat's hair, tanned ram skins, dolphin skins, and acacia wood, oil for lighting, spices for the anointing oil, and for the aromatic incense, lapis lazuli, and other stones for setting, for the ephod and for the breastpiece. And let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them.
Okay,
Exactly as,
pause.
yeah, yep.
And let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. What? What is this line? I thought the divine was everywhere. Make a sanctuary? What is this telling us about our liberation journey? I'm going to say more about this when we finish the Parsha, but any thoughts right now about this?
Oh, well, it's connecting to a physical space, okay? And so property maybe even, which for me is problematic, but as a socialist, but it's definitely, and it's carving out, this is us and this is them maybe, which is problematic too, but maybe it doesn't have to be seen problematically. I'm certainly open to different interpretations here.
Yeah, I'll say a lot more about this when we get to the end, but other thoughts before I...
Maybe that there's a holy place for worship set aside from God being with us everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a distinction from the whole and the sacred, the Kodesh. So that could be, sometimes when we're just in our lives, we forget that everywhere is sacred. So we might need an altar or a sacred place to go to remind us that there's actually holiness in the world, perhaps. And so maybe that's part of our journey for liberation, is to remind ourselves that holiness is accessible, it's there. We just have to enter the space. And I'm just looking at what's written in the chat. One sec. Alchemy, something coming to mind for me is how offerings and gifts are basically the same with different labels. It's offering in a religious setting, but gifts with friends and families. Maybe that's also an offering. Maybe that's also an offering or dwelling amongst us and in us as we care for each other. Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. So other thoughts, or we'll keep reading and I'll say some more after we finish.
Well, have we covered any kashrut rules at this point in history? Or, Al Tevashel Gazi and Halavi Mo? No?
Yeah, not at this point.
No, because the reasoning in the Torah I recall is that you will be holy if you eat this way, and holy kadosh kadosh kadosh, and which would seem to be more again broader than this, more specific. This is the profane and this is the sacred kind of space.
Right.
But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Right. What's interesting about this, create this holy space is, Austin just said mishpatim is no mixing of milk and, thank you, Austin. Milk and meat. Couldn't remember that other word because I don't eat it.
Al tevashel ged, and I misquoted Al tevashel gedi b'chalav imo. I once was a cook and I did kashrut, so I memorized that line.
But what's interesting about this particular part is that we create this sanctuary, this dwelling, but we haven't had the golden calf yet. That comes later. And one thing we taught in Torah is that there is no beginning and no end. So this seems to be like out of place, but the rabbi says there is no beginning and there is no end. There's just this continual story. So, maybe the divine is aware that the golden calf is coming, or maybe the golden calf has happened, and maybe this was written after the golden calf, but there's an awareness by the divine, let's say, that people are losing connection with the awesomeness of the physical liberation, because now they're wandering in the desert. Life is getting hard. They're getting antsy. They don't have the food they want. All these things are happening, and so the divine's saying, "Oh, I gotta give them something to connect to, because they're human beings, and it's hard to connect to non-tangible things. And so I got to give them something that feels graspable, that feels tangible, that feels imminent in this world." So perhaps we could think of it that way. And River, I see your hand.
Yeah, just building on what you're saying, the whole connection piece, because Shechanti is Shekhinah, the indwelling presence. And so, the point here, it seems to me, the whole architecture of the Mishkan is related to an architecture of what it means to hold the indwelling presence. Which goes back, I think, also to what Nikki was saying earlier, about practice. That, there has to be some container, some architecture that we have of practice or whatever to connect.
Beautiful. Thank you. Neil, do I see your hand again?
Yes, what came to mind using a musical analogy is a musician will tune the instrument before playing, which is taking an active participatory role. And by doing that, they are then able to experience from the instrument the clarity of the notes and harmonies. So that statement, "make a place where God could dwell," might not be that God needs this, but in order for us to experience it, we need to realign something within ourselves.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I don't think it's for the divine. Definitely think it's for human beings. Yes. Thank you. Okay, Nikki, continue. I'm not going to interrupt again until the end, I don't think. I mean,
Maybe.
no promises, but I'll
Maybe.
try.
Okay. "And let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them, exactly as I show you. The pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnishings, so shall you make it. They shall make an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits long, a cubit and a half wide, and a cubit and a half high. Overlay it with pure gold, overlay it inside and out, and make upon it a gold molding round about. Cast 4 gold rings for it to be attached to its 4 feet, 2 rings on one of its side walls, and 2 on the other. Make poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold. Then insert the poles into the rings on the side walls of the ark for carrying the ark. The poles shall remain in the rings of the ark, they shall not be removed from it. And deposit in the ark the tablets of the pact which I will give you. You shall make a cover of pure gold, 2.5 cubits long, and a cubit and a half wide. Make 2 cherubim of gold, make them hammered work at the 2 ends of the cover. Make 1 cherub at one end, and the other cherub at the other end. Of one piece with the cover shall you make the cherubim at its 2 ends. The cherubim shall have their wings spread out above, shielding the cover with their wings. They shall confront each other, the faces of the cherubim being turned towards the cover. Place the cover on top of the ark after depositing it inside the ark, the pact that I will give you. There I will meet with you, and I will impart to you from above the cover, from between the 2 cherubim, that's not my word, that are on the top of the ark of the pact, all that I will command you concerning the Israelite people. You
Those
shall
are the speech acts, the pact.
what?
The pact, the ark of the pact is essentially the speech acts, right? The tablets.
You shall make a table of acacia wood, 2 cubits long, 1 cubit wide, and a cubit and a half high. Overlay it with pure gold, and make a gold molding around it. Make a rim of a hand's breadth around it, and make a gold molding for its rim around about. Make 4 gold rings for it and attach the rings to the 4 corners of its 4 legs. The rings shall be next to the rim as holders for poles to carry the table. Make the poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold. By these the table shall be carried. Make its bowls, ladles, jars, and jugs with which to offer libations. Make them of pure gold. And on the table you shall set the bread of display to be before me always. You shall make a lampstand of pure gold. The lampstand shall be made of hammered work, its base and its shaft, its cup, calyxes, and petals shall be of one piece. 6 branches shall issue from its sides, 3 branches from one side of the lampstand, and 3 branches from the other side of the lampstand. On one branch there shall be 3 cups shaped like almond blossoms, each with calyx and petals, and on the next branch there shall be 3 cups shaped like almond blossoms, each with calyx and petals, so for all 6 branches issuing from the lampstand. And on the lampstand itself there shall be 4 cups shaped like almond blossoms, each with calyx and petals, a calyx of one piece with it under a pair of branches, and a calyx with one piece with it under the second pair of branches, and a calyx of one piece with it under the last pair of branches, so for all 6 branches issuing from the lampstand. Their calyxes and their stems shall be of one piece with it, the whole of it a single hammered piece of pure gold. Make it 7 lamps. The lamps shall be so mounted as to give the light on its front side, and its tongs and fire pans of pure gold. It shall be made with all these furnishings out of a talent of pure gold. Note well and follow the patterns for them that are being shown you on the mountain. Keep going. As for the tabernacle, make it of 10 strips of cloth. Make these of fine twisted linen, of blue, purple, and crimson yarns, with a design of cherubim worked into them. The length of each cloth shall be 28 cubits, and the width of each cloth shall be 4 cubits, all the cloths to have the same measurements. 5 of the cloths shall be joined to one another, and the other 5 cloths shall be joined to one another. Make loops of blue wool on the edge of the outermost cloth of the one set, and do likewise on the edge of the outermost cloth of the other set. Make 50 loops on the one cloth, and 50 loops on the edge of the end cloth of the other set, the loops to be opposite one another. And make 50 gold clasps, and couple the cloths to one another with the clasps, so that the tabernacle becomes one whole. You shall then make cloths of goat's hair, for a tent over the tabernacle. Make the cloths 11 in number. The length of each cloth shall be 30 cubits, and the width of each cloth shall be 4 cubits, the 11 cloths to have the same measurements. Join 5 of the cloths by themselves, and the other 6 cloths by themselves, and fold over the 6th cloth at the front of the tent. Make 50 loops on the edge of the outermost cloth of one set, and 50 loops on the edge of the cloth of the other set. Make 50 copper clasps and fit the clasps into the loops and couple the tent together so that it becomes one whole. As for the overlapping excess of the cloths of the tent, the extra half cloth shall overlap the back of the tabernacle, while the extra cubit at either end of each length of the tent cloth shall hang down to the bottom of the 2 sides of the tabernacle and cover it. And make for the tent a covering of tanned ram skins and a covering of dolphin skins above. You shall make the planks for the tabernacle of acacia wood upright. The length of each plank shall be 10 cubits, and the width of each plank 1.5 cubits. Each plank shall have 2 tenons parallel to each other. Do the same with all the planks of the tabernacle. Of the planks of the tabernacle, make 20 planks on the south side, making 40 silver sockets under the 20 planks, 2 sockets under the one plank for its 1 tenon, and 2 sockets under each following plank for its 2 tenons. And for the other side wall of the tabernacle on the north side, 20 planks, with their 40 silver sockets, 2 sockets under the one plank, and 2 sockets under each following plank. And for the rear of the tabernacle, to the west, make 6 planks, and make 2 planks for the corners of the tabernacle at the rear. They shall match at the bottom and terminate alike at the top inside one ring. Thus shall it be with both of them. They shall form the 2 corners. Thus there shall be 8 planks with their sockets of silver, 16 sockets, 2 sockets under the first plank, and 2 sockets under each of the other plank. You shall make bars of acacia wood, 5 for the planks of the one side of the tabernacle, 5 bars for the planks on the other side wall of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the planks of the wall at the rear to the west. The center bar halfway up the plank shall run from end to end. Overlay the planks with gold and make their rings of gold as holders for the bars, and overlay the bars with gold. Then set up the tabernacle according to the manner of it that you were shown on the mountain. You shall make a curtain of blue, purple, and crimson yards, and fine twisted linens. It shall have a design of cherubim worked into it. Hang it upon 4 posts of acacia wood overlaid with gold, and having hooks of gold set in 4 sockets of silver. Hang the curtains under the clasps, and carry the ark of the pact there behind the curtain, so that the curtain shall serve you as a partition between the holy and the holy of holies. Place the cover upon the ark of the pact in the holy of holies. Place the curtain outside the curtain, and the lampstand by the south wall of the tabernacle opposite the table, which is to be placed by the north wall. You shall make a screen for the entrance of the tent of blue, purple, and crimson yards, and fine twisted linens done in embroidery. Make 5 posts of acacia wood for the screen and overlay them with gold, their hooks being of gold, and cast for them 5 sockets of copper.
Okay, I'm going to stop us here. There's 19 more lines in this next chapter here, but I'm going to pause us here. I think we get the idea of the details and intricacies of what's being set forth here. We can stop sharing for now, Austin. Thank you. So I was listening to all this, and I've been thinking about this Parsha, obviously, when I knew we were reading this detailed Parsha, and there's a couple different things I want to point out, and then we'll have some discussion in breakout groups. But as I was just listening to this, I was thinking, what is this? All this detail and all this specificity, and build it with this many cubits, and which is inches, we could figure out inches, and this size, and I'm imagining, so the people are wandering in the desert, they've been struggling, they're hungry, they're feeling lost and frustrated and angry, and maybe the divine's thinking or saying or coming up with, I have to give them a sense of meaning and purpose, because they've forgotten the struggle already. They've been begging to go back, they've been arguing about what's happening. I need to get them a sense that they are a community of people working together. So how can I do that? I'm going to have them build something together. And what does that mean? That means they have to go to each other. Who got gold from your Egyptian neighbors? Who got silver? Who got crimson cloth? Who got purple? Who got blue? Who got wood? And so now I can imagine this mass of people like running around, trying to gather together all of these pieces, like a children's what do you call that, hunt?
Scavenger hunt. Scavenger hunt.
Right, treasure hunt. We'll call it scavenger hunt or treasure. And they're all talking to each other and like, we got to build this massive thing. And why are we building it? Because then there will be this divine presence that will dwell in it. And so it's like a redirection of their energy from their frustration and angst and fear into a collective, collaborative building of something exquisitely beautiful, we can assume, given all the different things that are going into this, all the colors and the gold and the silver, and they're working in unison together to build something that could be really, that they can always look at, always look toward, not only as a manifestation of the indwelling presence of the Shekhinah, of the divine, but also as a manifestation of a community coming together, of disparate parts and disparate pieces coming together. So that's the first thing I want to say about this. And if anyone wants to reflect on that, then I have something else I'm going to say, and then we'll go into breakout rooms. Brent.
Yes, it just occurred to me because I heard another rabbi say that a previous congregation, when they got to this chapter, the folks who were civic engineers perked up because they were very interested, and maybe artisans. They were very interested in all these details. whereby previously it was more, well, whatever it was, it didn't intrigue them that much. But now they had something they could think about, the measurements and the size and how it was going together. So I thought that was an interesting comment. But the other thing that struck me, and there's so much that strikes us with what's going on in the real world, and what our Israeli cousins and brothers and sisters are, many of them Jewish, are involved in, what was, we're destroying a whole area. And here we're reading about constructing something positive. And I'm thinking there's quite a disparity there. And I mean, there always is in this real world. But that just struck me.
Yeah.
That we seem to be doing more deliberate abusive destruction right now from a Jewish Israeli point of view than anything else, and how sad that is. Of course, military and industrial is always destructive, but it's not as obvious as what's going on right now. Okay, that was my thought. Thanks very much.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah. It's a very strong contrast to point out, this building of something exquisite and beautiful in the face of the destruction and horror that's happening in Gaza and the West Bank. Yeah, thank you. Let's take a deep breath and just hold that for a moment. And as you said, this is this kind of military industrial complex destruction, big agriculture destruction. All of these things have been going on forever, but it's really prevalent and in our face and powerfully awful today. Anyone else?
Yes.
Yeah, please.
I took the previous remarks very seriously, but I also have another sort of question. Judaism has always been against graven images, and it, unlike Catholicism, for instance, it has not been the religion of great art. And yet we read here about making art in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And that just gave me pause.
Nice. Yeah, there's many places in the Torah where it's talking about artisans creating things, and so there is something in our tradition, at least in the Torah, that tells us to create sacred spaces, but that nothing, and at the same time, the divine is infinite and uncapturable, if you will, which I'll be talking about in a second. So there is that tension there. So thank you for pointing that out. Yeah. Neil.
You're right in what you're saying, Jacqueline, and yet this has a lot of paradox in it. At this particular moment, it just sends shivers up my spine. People who have been enslaved for over 200 years, who their efforts, their creativity was exploited for the grandeur of the oppressor. And what they're being told at this moment is your unique talents, your expression of your creativity and your emotional being in the world is welcome. Together, we are going to build something that is the embodiment of our individual sense of expression and humanity. And it just is amazing.
Beautiful, Neil. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. So the Kabbalist Luria was troubled by a fundamental theological question that we can explore in this Parsha. If God is everywhere, how can anything else exist in the world? And if God is infinite, how can anything finite exist? In other words, isn't everything God? And the way that Luria answered this question was as such. Luria said that the creation of the world was made possible by an act of contraction or withdrawal on the part of the divine. And you might have heard of this as tzimtzum. so that there are aspects of the world that actually are not God. God contracted, and then the world could be birthed forth. So why create a dwelling place for that which is infinite and beyond all? And Tzimtzum, interestingly, is actually originally a rabbinic term. And for the Talmudic sages, it means something very different. Rather than divine contracting itself, Tzimtzum explains how a vast, uncontainable God can dwell in a finite, definite space. So they're asking two different questions, right? Luria is wondering, how can a world exist apart from God? And the sages want to know, how can God be intensely present in one place in the world? So for Luria, Tzimtzum yields divine absence, right? God contracts and there's an absent space and the world can exist. And for the sages, it yields intensified presence. And taken together, these notions of Tzimtzum convey the importance of being present while simultaneously making space. And this provides space for human intervention and free will in the world. We can obey God's will or we can thwart it. We can live holy lives or we cannot. We can care for the needy or we can ignore them. We can build a loving and just world, or we can build one filled with injustice, devastation, and death. Because we have free will. And God needs to contract some of God's power, perhaps sometimes all of God's power, for us to have this free will. God is both immanent, present in the world, and God is transcendent, beyond the limitations. And Abraham Joshua Heschel says that God needs our partnership, right? The title of his book is God in Search of Man. So we'll just say God in Search of Human Beings. The covenant with God is mutual. It's not a one-way street. We live holy lives and God will descend and participate with us. We don't, and God will contract. And Martin Buber teaches that in relationships, we first must recognize and affirm this separation, that the other is not me, and allow this other to be fully themselves. And only then can we enter into a divine relationship in an I-thou relationship. And so that requires us to uphold the dignity of the other, even while we uphold simultaneously the dignity of ourselves. It requires acceptance of the other, of their very existence. If we only see the other as not us, we can still demonize them, objectify them, and treat them and see them as an it. It is the second step of entering into the relationship with the other that allows us to engage with and see their humanity and their divinity, and to engage with them and treat them as an thou, in a sacred I-thou relationship. So I was thinking about this in this historical moment we're in, because right now in this historical moment, some Jews are being called to stand up for the humanity, safety, dignity, and lives of Palestinians in the midst of Jewish trauma. And how do we hold ourselves while holding the suffering of Palestinians? And in the ceasefire work and solidarity work with Palestinians that I've become involved in, this is a really big question. It's a big question in all solidarity work. How do we hold our needs in the face of others' suffering? And so, for example, one of the things that has come up in some of these circles is Jews have talked about wanting grieving circles and spaces, because we do grieving and it's meaningful for us. And we don't only want to grieve the loss of Jewish lives, we often want to grieve the loss of Palestinian lives, the loss of what's happening in the Jewish world, the loss of a sense of connection to a Judaism that's meaningful and relevant and holy and justice-seeking. And we want to hold these grieving spaces. But when you're in solidarity with Palestinians and talking to Palestinians about this, they think, no, don't do grieving circles. That's a luxury. Our people are being slaughtered every day. There's a genocide happening, and we need you to stand up and join us in meaningful actions that confront and challenge the ongoing genocide, displacement, etc. And this is a tension in all movement work. How do we hold this? So this is the discussion for the breakout room. What is required for us to be present, to be available, to be attentive and caring for ourselves and others, while simultaneously making space for the other to be fully themselves, to express their needs? So we could explore this in intimate relationships, but I'm really interested in exploring it and how you think about this in terms of movement work. how do we listen to the needs of others and contract our own without abandoning ourselves? What makes it challenging for us to do this? And are there any divine instructions needed today to help us build sacred spaces? And so, Sharon, I see your hand up. Is it something you want to ask before we go into breakout rooms, or you want to bring it to the breakout room? Either answer is fine to that question.
Oh, I'll bring it to the breakout room. That's fine.
Okay, bring it to the breakout room, and then we'll bring it back to the group afterward. Okay, are there any questions? The questions I posed, there were a few of them. I realized you can pick one. But I'm really asking to focus on, like, how do we stay in thou relationships and connected in movement spaces when we have needs and we really want to honor and uplift the needs of others? This is really challenging work that we're being called to do today. So you'll go around and share, you'll listen to each other, right? Remember our guidance and guidelines around really listening. And then after everyone has a chance to speak, then perhaps we can dialogue more openly. And Sharon, did you have a question now?
I do have something I want to say. I've had more challenges dialoguing with other Jewish people than with pro-Palestinian people. Just want to mention.
Right, so you could bring that. It can be that too. Because those also are competing needs, right? Those are also competing challenges. So all of that. Okay, are folks good? Okay, welcome back, everyone. Did you have rich discussions in your breakout rooms? Anybody want to share? Questions, reflections, interesting learnings, challenges, you know. Sharon, start us off.
Yeah, we had a really good discussion and about the Parsha today and how it kind of was symbolic of the struggle that we're going through right now, where it contains symbols of, you know, you have a whole made up of parts, and that's really what we're dealing with on a global scale, you know, and how individualism gets in the way of us seeing, you know, we see our own needs, but we don't see, not only do we not see other people's needs, but we don't see that we share the same needs.
Beautiful. Imagine, you know, you're just making me think about it. I'm going back to like my treasure hunt, scavenger hunt image. Imagine if we were like doing that on a global level. Like, what do you need? What do we need to make this world sacred and holy? Let's go and gather it and build it together. It reminds me of, I've done a lot of work in unhoused communities here, and that's actually my feeling of what happens a lot there. Not always, of course, it's life. But I think when people are living closer to the edge, there tends to be more sense of, what do you need? What have I got that you need? How can we share and how can we work together to make this unhoused community really work for everyone? And then the city comes in and they demolish it, and then we have that problem. But yeah. Nikki.
I feel like I'm attached to being a non-attached.
Say more.
Well, what came up for me in the conversation was how I want to allow spaciousness in conversations, and it's not my job to necessarily change people. And when I get invested in having to change people, I want to give people an opinion, but then I get angry if I can get angry if I feel like their perspective is different than mine and quote unquote wrong, and I have the way that's right, and I know better, and mine is more moral. And so then I get caught in my own ego. And if I come from not my ego and I become more spacious, then I can get attached to being non-egoic.
No, nothing to say about all that. Beautiful. Right. So how do we hold both our ego that is intended to uplift our highest selves, let's say. There is also that ego of us. And also and struggle against or lovingly embrace and gently mikvah the ego that's attached to being right.
Yes.
Maybe that's the the dance and yeah.
I mean, you just reframed what I said. You got an answer?
I
I mean,
think
it's a balance. It's such a balanced line. I mean, mostly for me, I see it, and this was really helpful when I first met you years ago in the course that I did with you, in terms of how to have spaciousness for another perspective, and yet how to not be enraged at a perspective that feels so wrong to me.
yeah.
It's and who am I to say it's wrong? How do I know? I keep going back to 9/11 when, the people who were on the plane, the terrorists, felt like they were doing God's work. It's like how can I decide what's the truth? What there is no truth. I mean, I don't hold the truth. I have a perspective, and when I get off on my own tangent, I'm losing that I thou-ness, and it's a really struggle. It's really hard.
Yeah. So I would say
I think,
people-
I'm sorry.
when people are engaging in actions that are harmful and hurtful to others, then I would question if that's God's work. Now, that doesn't mean that the place from where they're coming, their needs and their yearnings aren't God's work or aren't a deep truth. But if I think about 9/11 and the terrorists, I easily could see and understand and taught classes around understanding where they were coming from and the pain and angst that caused that action. But the action itself, the violent action to kill innocent people, is to me a different step. But the pain and the rage and the hurt and the trauma and all that is real. And so the question for me is, how do we hold with tenderness and embrace the brokenness in all of us and turn toward nonviolence as a solution for addressing that?
And in the nonviolence, Kat, I have a question, because that's interesting what you just shared. What about violence to property, which doesn't harm animals, plants, or humans?
Right. I think each of us needs to ask that question for ourselves. Right? Is that I don't know where I fall on that, but I generally wouldn't engage in that. But I mean, let's say that the property damage is to an agricultural firm that is, or a company that is destroying life, whether it's animal life or people's lives. So then let's say we go to Caterpillar, for example, and start destroying their plows or their machinery. Or we go to Boeing and destroy their planes and their weapons of mass destruction. Okay. That to me is very different, right? Because then you're interrupting the actual machinery of violence and aggression, and stopping the machinery. If you could, I see hands, and I'll call on you. And if we can interrupt that, then that seems to me to be, there you are, an interesting place to stand. But I think each of us have to find our own place in that. But I think we can certainly, explore that as to terms of what is violent and nonviolent. So I just, Nikki, do you feel complete for now?
Well, yes, for now, but not forever.
Yeah. Nor shall we ever be complete forever. So thank you for the question. Todd, I started to jump in, and then I saw Jacqueline and then Sharon and Jacqueline and Neil. So
I remember what I was going to say. I think when you come to eliminating people's lives, and they're not, running at you with a gun or a spear or something, that you draw a line. You got to draw a line there, and there is a line to be drawn. Everything is not okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I can't justify flying planes into a building of people that are unconscious, basically. but that's a very tough question, and the core one that I'm dealing with all the time is I think what you have to do is through the rituals of reading the Bible, the Torah, meditating, you keep your sense of balance as best you can. I mean, it's been said that that's a Socratic method, and that that's your balancing stick on the tight wire as you cross over, and the net below you is your faith. So it's a constant thinking and work, and it's a human condition, and it nearly drives me crazy many times, but
Yeah, thank you. So I saw Sharon and then Jacqueline and then Neil. Those are the orders that I saw you folks in. So
Oh, okay. Let them go first because I already spoke.
Jacqueline and then Neil and then Sharon. Jacqueline Falvey.
Okay. I think I'm responding to your question, but maybe I'm not. Anyway, you were talking about grieving and the people who have very different views and how to deal with the situation. And I'm if I see a bright spot, it is the groups of or the individuals in Israel, Israelis and Palestinians who really are doing good work together. The pro-peace groups who are keeping the peace in some mixed cities, and I think who are showing us a path to the future.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Now the other Jacqueline. Thank you, Jacqueline. Two Jacquelines.
Yeah, in the triad, River was saying something about the individualism is a really big problem. She put it in context, so I don't know, I don't want to interpret, but what I got from it was exactly that. And the Parsha, and suddenly I started to understand the Parsha, because only when you give people, like children, a task that they need to do together, does this individualism disappear, especially if it is in the context of creating a sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me seems exactly the lesson for now, is that if we forget about our individualism and focus on the fact that it is about sanctuary, the whole world is about sanctuary. And if we would let the divine lead us like children to that work, then I think we would be on the right path.
Amen. Thank you. Neil.
Yes, Kat, what you said earlier about destroying property at Boeing and other warmongers, we all know that courageously that was the work of the Berrigan brothers and plowshares, where they knew that, I don't know, thumping the head of a warhead is not going to destroy it, but make it unusable, and that it would heighten the sense of moral outrage that a person of faith feels so strongly against this. They are getting arrested to bring the message of how our tax dollars going into such things is a violation of most people's values. And certainly that's a lot different than fascists who engage in targeted assassinations.
Yes. Thank you. Yep. Sharon.
Yeah, I just wanted to share what I said in our breakout briefly, that I sit on the Washington State Democrats Senate Committee, and on January 28th, we got a resolution passed by that body calling for a humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza and also calling for restored funding to UNRWA. And we were at that point, the 5th state Democratic organization to pass a resolution calling for a ceasefire. Sorry about that. And the first to call for restored funding to UNRWA, because our meeting was like 3 days after that happened. So we had to get 50 signatures from state committee members to even consider that urgent resolution. And then we got it passed. We had 2 conflicts. One conflict was with the Jewish caucus. I'm Jewish, and I was asked to put my name on that resolution, which I did, but I'm not a member of the Jewish caucus. I go to other caucus meetings. So we had a conflict that we had not consulted the Jewish caucus. That was a problem. We should have absolutely done that well ahead of time. So that's something we're talking about in the future. How do we bring in people that are really stakeholders in a resolution that's being proposed, so that they feel heard and they feel safe, even if we don't, change the resolution or water it down very much. And the other thing that when we were gathering signatures to bring this resolution to the body, there were 4 pro-Palestinian protesters that came into the lobby where we were gathering signatures, and we implored them to not protest, at least until after we had a vote on that resolution, because we weren't trying to get it passed. And we assumed that we would have a hard enough time getting it passed without protesters. So 3 of them agreed. I mean, they all agreed to wait until after the vote, but one thing got moved up on the agenda, and this person couldn't wait and dodged the dais where the leadership was sitting, and I was afraid it wouldn't pass at that point, and luckily it did pass. But it's just when your anger gets in the way, you can really get more of what you don't want and hurt your chances of getting what you do want. And so, just how do you work with people? How do you build trust? And how do you control your anger and your emotions?
Thank you for sharing that, Sharon. Good job. Congratulations. Other thoughts and reflections? This Parsha is interesting to me because when you just read it on the surface with these details of the wood and the colors and the size, and it doesn't necessarily offer a lot or it may not offer a lot of meaning, but I think we really teased out a lot of depth from it, and so thanks everyone. Yeah, River, I see your hand.
Yeah, thinking about the details, what really struck me in the reading of it this time was how many different things are made of one piece. And that goes, to the whole question of what creation entails, differentiation, but that doesn't mean individualism.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
So things can play different roles to hold up the structure, but it's built on relations. It's not built on individuals. And I think othering has so much to do with the fact that we consider that they're not us. It's not me, it's the other. And so then there's a tension and a competition between my needs and the needs of the other. And I think just, justice work in terms of a different ethics where we hold the fact that the other is ourselves in a really profound, deep ontological sense, really can shift the way in which these kinds of things are understood. And so, the collectivity of this is not just manufactured, so to speak, but it's built into the very structure of reality itself. This way in which each of our survival is dependent on each other. It just is the way it is. I mean, that's part of what I understand Isaac Luria's solution to going from the infinite to the finite to be, about this kind of creation of the world in which we're all coming from the one, we're all part of the one. And that really just shifts the entire perspective politically because of the different sense of ethics and relationality to one another.
That's beautiful, River. Thank you. And as I'm looking at your background, when I do the Shema, and we do it 2 times, the way I think about it is based on this concept that you were just speaking about, which is the first time I picture the oneness shattering, the vessel shattering and spreading out, kind of like the stars behind you, right? Like, and we're all part of that, right? We're also, and I picture this shattering of all of us into these separate pieces, and like the differentiation. And we get pushed in that differentiation further and further away from each other. And when we're further and further away from each other, it's hard to see that we came from the oneness. So then when I say it the second time, I'm starting from the separation of having a hard time to see each other, and I'm imagining calling us back into that oneness. So the first time it's like allowing for the separation, like Buber said. But then the second time it's calling back into the relationship of the oneness for I thou. And so your image behind you is that for me. That's what I picture in my mind's eyes. I picture like specks of light, specks of stardust separating, and then the specks coming back together. And maybe in that process we're mikvud into the oneness of all.
Do you mind if I respond to that, Kat? Thanks for sharing that with us. I just wanted to say that, individualism is based on this idea that there's this and there's that, and we interact with one another. But if we think of it as I've talked about using quantum physics, an interaction, there's always only an action within. There's an actioning within that makes thising and thating, differentiating, but only as part of an entanglement. So it's always differentiating, entangling. So the things that we think are separate are not really separate at all. I just really think that a kind of turning of the kaleidoscope of how we think about isness can really reverberate in terms of what's needed to think about our investment in helping the other, as if the other is, somebody that we ought to help either because that's what our ethics says, to help the other.
Right.
But it's really it's really the relation that is at stake. And if it's always the relation that's at stake, then there's just a whole other way. So I just think there are these habits of mind that we all get entrained into, for hundreds of years of thinking about separateness. So for me, the stars behind me are in me. I'm made of stars, and they're completely entangled with one another in particular ways that show off our differences. So thanks for that.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Todd.
Oh, thanks. I guess everything I was thinking has kind of been said, but the genius of this text is I think it shows that, or it's saying that to get that heart moved in the right way, the divine way, it takes, effort, a lot of effort and constant effort and work. And I think that's the intricacies of how to, make the ark and so forth. To me, that's what that says. And the thing that drives me crazy is how to get this. I mean, we're in the minority. Those of us that are clearly saying, hey, look, the emperor has no clothes. How do you get that contagion, if that's the right word for it, going? I guess you just keep plugging along. But anyway, that's the challenge. That's what has to be done, as is getting this. The narrative the popular narrative has to be changed, dramatically. And this country's not doing it. All my life I thought, oh, we're, rah, rah, America, we're the bad guys. Anyway, okay.
Yeah, we need a massive movement of consciousness raising. So that's part of what we are trying to do here at Beit Tikkun. And so we're glad you're here, and then you bring it from here into the world, and hopefully it grows and expands. And Ari.
Yeah, I wanted to address these 2 pieces from Buber, I, it, I, thou, or experience and encounter, as they were characterized by Buber, I see them more on a continuum, actually. And I see that I move into Karen Barad's ideas from New Materialism of the idea, which connects, I think, somewhat to what River said, maybe, which is that what it's intra-action instead of interaction. So we're co-constructing our relationship and entanglement with the text today and with each other. And that it is this that generates meaning, and that meaning is as material as anything else in the world. And so when we're doing that at the movement level, I think the power is in the intra relationship and intradependence, if you will, not just interdependence.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you. Jacqueline, and then I'm going to sum it up because we're coming to the end. Thank you, Ari.
Yeah, I really, in a way, am focused very differently, and I'm focused on the emergency that we are encountering today, especially among the Jewish community, and also, and of course, in Israel. It used to be not too long ago that the diaspora, let's say American Jewish community, there was a kind of a connective tissue between people with different views within the American Jewish community. And it was very much concerned with, I mean, a lot of it focused on Israel, but a lot of it didn't. Anyway, now that has all changed. And even religious, our ideas about religious people in Israel have changed. So I don't think I'm ever going to change the mind or heart of the Idmar Ben-Gvirs of the world. And I don't think that, I think it's a waste of time to try.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, right. So the question is who can be swayed and who can't be swayed?
Yes, and there are just some people who cannot, and we're losing time.
Yeah, I think that, I think that over time everyone can be moved, but we have to build a world where there is a prevalence of care and community and interdependence and intraconnectedness. And as the energy shifts toward that world in a mass way, then we're much more likely to see people moving toward that energy. Because even in the religious world, they actually live within their community in that way, in an intraconnected, intradependent way. And the question is, how do we build a world that helps people see that you don't need to have an isolated community that does that, that we could build a world that does that, rather than this small Jewish religious community, this small Christian religious community. How do we help people trust that we can, across differences, have that quality of intradependence and intraconnection that people experience within their narrow communities? And I think that's the work. That's our work. And I'm gonna stop us here with just a blessing that and I want to say I think all of us struggle with this. I'm assuming all of us struggle with this, both in our more personal struggles and in the broader society struggles. And so may we all be blessed to find the places in our hearts, first ourselves, and then in relationships with others and in communities, where we can really step into the discomfort, the constricted places in which we can stretch ourselves, in which we can drop our egos of separation and step into our highest selves and really see our interdependence, so much so that maybe even we get glimpses of the separation fading, where we literally start to get glimpses of separation fading and oneness being uplifted and felt and seen and experienced in very profound and meaningful ways. And that takes a lot of a lot of personal resilience, a lot of coming back to self and stepping into love when maybe we're scared or angry or hurt, and finding our way back even if the other is not meeting us there. And so may we all find our way through the morass of this time and come out, may we come out individually and collectively and as a world into a place of massive, radical interdependence and intra-love and intra-oneness and wholeness. Amen. That was an amen. Thank you all so much. So now we'll close our Torah reading. The blessings, feel free to unmute and say the blessings with us. Baruch
Adonai Eloheinu
Eloheinu haolam asher
Yinatamon Torah Emet V'chayei Olam Nota B'tochenu Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah